Welcome to Newsline Digital. I'm Neha. Now it's a no bail for Bollywood actress and Sushant Singh Rajput's girlfriend Rhea Chakraborty. A special court in Mumbai denied bail to Rhea. Her brother and 8 other accused were involved in the case. Rhea was arrested by the NCB for allegedly arranging drugs for actor Sushant Singh Rajput. Rhea Chakraborty was arrested under sections 27A, 21, 22, 29 and 28 of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. The rejection of bail means she will stay in Baikula jail for now. The legal team of Rhea will now be deciding to approach the High Court. In the second request for bail, she did mention, and I quote, she had not committed any crime whatsoever and had been falsely implicated in the case. But the NCB, while arguing, stated that if the accused is released, the actor could tamper with the evidence. While this was the case, many have also discussed the role of Narcotics Bureau in the entire episode. NCB's role is essentially to prevent narcotics from being imported from other countries and to also stop the usage in the country. NCB's track record also highlights that they go beyond the big fish and leave the smaller cases which involve marijuana. A former top NCB official in an interview to a leading news website also stated, and I quote, "The past practice and precedence tells us they are supposed to monitor and break big supply chains, international and interstate. That's why they have done mostly. That's what they have done mostly. They were originally doing awareness camps and later they started functioning as an enforcement agency. Chasing ganja puria is not their mandate." Now, of course, let's quickly go across to Mr. KV Dhananjay, who joins me over the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Dhananjay. I hope you're keeping well. Now, if you would be able to tell us what really is the role of NCB in this case, what's essentially the nature of their work, and is it true that they usually do not go behind small cases?
Well, it's true. The NCB, the mandate of the NCB is such that they, in fact, would not do what the local police would do. And very often they get into large-scale trafficking. And given that background, it's a bit surprising that they, in fact, gotten into this matter very actively. But that apart, we should not really worry if NCB is part of it, because at the end of the day, whatever is the argument that Rhea Chakraborty has to make, she's got to make it, irrespective of whether it is police force that she's making it against or whether it's the NCB that she's making it against. So now, if you start looking at the apparent merit in this matter, the bail to get bail in a case of NDPS, one must know that confessing to a police officer makes it so much more difficult to get a bail. So the reports were that Rhea Chakraborty did confess to the police officer during her interrogation that she did supply or provide or distribute prohibited drugs to Sushant Singh. Now, if that is the case, then that certainly would weigh against her in the matter of grant of bail. But if that was not the case, then the denial of bail may seem a bit, surprising, because the quantity in this case is certainly a few, dozens of grams, and the substance in question, which is cannabis, by the way, is a prohibited substance, no doubt. But then the law is quite graded when it comes to punishment. If you are in possession or if you have trafficked a small quantity, then the most punishment that you would get is a year in jail. And if you traffic more than that but less than commercial quantity, then it's about 10 years. And if it's more than commercial quantity, then it's about 20 years. Now, in the facts of this case, what we do know is that the quantity concerned was a small quantity, in which event, if at all they were to be convicted on the charge with all the evidence against them, the most punishment is only 1 year. And if you look at the other crimes, or for that matter, the Indian Penal Code or the Code of Criminal Procedure of 1973, when the offence is less than 2 years, then it is bailable, which means the police themselves will hand out the bail to the accused.
All right.
And that is also as far as the NDPS Act is concerned, in the territory of Delhi and also in the territory of Rajasthan, the scenario is such that if for offences of this nature, where the maximum punishment could only be 1 year or slightly more than 1 year but less than 2 years, the police would themselves hand over the bail to the accused.
Right. So, Mr. Dhananjay, do you feel the NCB is flying in uncharted territory? And if not, do you see a big fish getting caught in the case? Because that's what they, essentially look for.
Well, the big fish, you see, again, it's difficult to think that Sushant Singh and Rhea Chakraborty issues would help the NCB to get a big fish, because I don't think that's quite likely. You would know that the central government itself came out with a report last year in 2019 that in fact estimated that there were 3 crore 10 lakh users of cannabis in India, adult users of cannabis in India. That's quite a lot. So there are these small, the users that in fact use small quantity, and probably Sushant Singh and then Rhea Chakraborty probably fall into that category. And it's not really worth so much of prosecutorial effort to go after a small case, is what anybody would say, and then you're entirely justified in hinting at that. But I don't think this case is going to lead them to big fish at any rate.
Right. So, Mr. Dhananjay, how do you personally see this entire case panning out? Are we seeing some personal scores being settled here?
I wouldn't know, because this case is so much in the media and there are so many conflicting versions. But all I can tell you, Neha, is this, that this case, had it happened, quite anonymously, I think the court would have granted bail at the very first hearing, and then they would all have gone home. Or for that matter, it's possible that for so small a quantity, the prosecution might not even have thought it's worth their time to prosecute them, because the quantity involved is so very less, isn't it? I mean, gone are the days, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when there was a stigma about all of these drugs. But now the law itself is graded. And after the law was graded, you see different high courts have started taking a very lenient view about it by saying, look, the substance that we think we have, we must in fact guard against at all costs is a very substance. Other countries are already allowing and without detrimental consequences. And by the way, so far as cannabis is concerned, there are activists that want to decriminalize cannabis across the country, and they will tell you that, as far as India is concerned, in 1912, 100 years ago, 10 lakh kg of cannabis was subject to excise duty in just half of India. So this was a country that has been using cannabis for thousands of years. Our Atharva Veda makes a mention of it, and Ayurveda treats it actually very differently, and then it's considered to be a sacred plant as far as the Ayurvedic tradition is concerned, and even in the Unani system of medicine. So, and then more medicinal use is being discovered. Now, why do you think this was prohibited? This was prohibited because it was believed that it has no medicinal use. But, it was always thought to have medicinal use, but then over the last 10, 20, 30 years, more medical research is bearing that out. But coming back strictly to the law, this is in fact a very petty case for that matter. I mean, this should be seen as a very petty case. Of course, I am assuming that this was, this will have nothing to do with Sushant Singh's homicide or murder or hanging or whatever. But then if this in fact led him to, take his own life, then I think it's far more serious. But that's not a drug issue, that's a homicide issue.
Right. So, Mr. Dhananjay, coming back to Rhea Chakraborty now, what next for her? Are there any chances of her securing a bail?
When two courts, what we do know is that the magistrate court in the first instance rejected bail, and now the sessions court has rejected it. When such is the case, if she were to approach the Mumbai High Court again, it's less likely that the Mumbai High Court would enlarge her on bail. So probably she will have to wait for some length of time, because the sessions court would have denied her bail on the ground that investigation could in fact, some amount of time could be given to the investigation to, tie up the loose ends. So if it's in that view of the matter, it would be difficult, I believe, for us to secure a bail right away from the Mumbai High Court. So she probably would wait. But all said and done, the question really comes down to whether she did confess, because unlike other crimes, where any confession made to a police officer is not at all admissible in court, the NDPS law is so very different. If you confess to the police officer, let's assume for a moment...
She's saying she did not confess, she was made to confess. She in fact in a statement has also stated that she has not committed any crime. She's being falsely implicated.
Now that's the difficulty. If the police were to in fact report that she has in fact confessed, the court would rather believe the police at this stage. And for her to basically disprove the police, she would have to enter a trial, and very well trial is a long way away. So if the police were to say, because ordinarily the police would not say that somebody has confessed. Now you take the case of Karnataka, where the Ragini film actress is concerned. The police has been categorically saying that she has not confessed so far. Now that might in fact brighten her chances of bail, but then we don't yet know fully the facts of her case. So let's take it away her case. But then coming back to this Rhea Chakraborty case itself, if the police are telling the court that she has confessed, I think it's worth our time to believe the police. While it's possible that she would say that she was pressurized and all that, but that version will have to be borne out in the trial that only comes later. So that aspect goes against that aspect weighs against an accused because confessions made to a police officer are admissible in NDPS cases. You should know that.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Dhananjay, for taking out some time and speaking to us. Well, it is, of course, a no bail for Rhea Chakraborty. As of now, she'll continue to stay at Baikula Jail, and the legal team, as I mentioned earlier as well, of Rhea Chakraborty is now mulling to approach the High Court.